I just got back from Manchester United Arsenal. I'll talk about tomorrow. I'm still a bit emotionally worn out. I'm going to be talking about Wolves versus Manchester City winning 4-0. And this felt like last season never happened. I know I made a video about City during the Club World Cup, and that kind of went a bit pear-shaped because they lost to Al Hilal. But the league is different. Nobody's still quite sure about how to place the Club World Cup yet. And this was the first game of the match, albeit against a bit of a depleted Wolves side with losses in the summer, only a few players coming in. I can't imagine this is how the Wolves team will look come the end of the transfer window. I still feel like there's additions to be made, and they've arguably played Wolves at a pretty convenient time, but they still dominated. I thought they were excellent. I thought some of the issues that existed last season weren't as prevalent here, and to some regards even fixed. And City were just excellent. They just played brilliant football. They were fluid. They were rotational. They just had all the hallmarks of a great Pep Guardiola side. And if this pertains, and obviously we'll see it tested against better teams, we'll see it against Spurs next weekend. And if they can maintain this level of performance, I just don't think you want to come up against a Pep Guardiola side when they're in this vein of form. But we'll go over what made this team so special. City on the ball, which will, to be honest, take up the most of the video. So Wolves in their 5-3-2 shape, or 5-2-3, or 5-4-1, however you want to label it, were deep, they were compact, there was very little space between Strand Larsen and the back five, tried to reduce the space that City could play through. Most part it worked, but City were able to gain advantage. And while, as it looks here, it's a 3-4-3 shape, it was malleable, was flexible, and it could change and alter depending on certain situations, depending on certain players' movements. And while there was a great level of freedom, it will be near enough impossible and painstakingly long to go over every single rotation that City had shown in the game. I'll try and go over some key ones and try and nail it as much as I can, and how they sort of just dismantled this Wolves shape. So Aït-Nouri would tuck into left back, allowing Rico Lewis to move into the right centre midfield position alongside Nico Gonzalez, who I thought, by the way, was excellent. This is the best game I've seen him have for City, as much as there hasn't been a lot of them. I thought he stepped into the shoes of Rodri nicely. I thought he was combative. I thought he was defensively aware. His positioning, which we'll cover in a second, was really good. But technically, I thought he took control of the ball, carried it forward, and threaded balls through. He showed his press resistance off really nice receiving off the back three and carrying it forward. Silva and Reinders in the attacking midfield positions with Bob and Doku flanking Haaland. And initially, how Wolves set up to counter this gave City some availability to play through. So Strand Larsen would typically drop onto Rico Lewis. They were okay with Wolves. They were okay with City having it in this back three as long as it was in front of the entire Wolves shape. Munetsi could maybe focus a little bit more on Aït-Nouri. And Aït-Nouri being a little bit more static in his positioning means he didn't get a lot of the ball unless it was just a pass sideways or recycled possession. But he was managed on that side. And I feel like in the build-up, City favoured that right-hand side. And that would be because Bellegarde initially was getting caught in between Rico Lewis and John Stones. I can only assume that he had maybe a task to mark Lewis while Munetsi marked Aït-Nouri. But Stones coming into that right centre-back position had a bit of licence to move forward if Bellegarde got caught in too narrow, and they could find that looping ball over to John Stones, and he could drive with the ball forward in this area and get up the pitch and try and overload that right-hand side and create potential goal-scoring situations or play to a player in a lot of space. Maybe Gomez has to react. This then leaves Reinders in a lot more space. Nico Gonzalez can make movements. Rico Lewis can as well. And just having that little bit of freedom to move forward means that City can overload and commit bodies forward without leaving themselves too exposed, because what this then meant was that Rico Lewis would hang a little bit further back for rest defence purposes, and also if Stones couldn't penetrate and he couldn't go through, if he passed to Bob and Bob gave it back to him, Lewis could drop back into the defence, make it a little bit more of a back four. Aït-Nouri could move across, and it would almost turn into a 2-3-2-3. Stones play it back, and then City have a wider base of which they can play through that Wolves shape. They try and then break Wolves down from side to side, pass it to Aït-Nouri. If he can't penetrate it, then it's back around, maybe back to Stones or Rico Lewis at right back, who's ever moved into that position. And it also felt like that Rico Lewis had a lot of control over what shape was present at that point in time. It came down to his positioning a lot, whether intentionally or not. That was how it seemed to happen, would be through him as the deeper box player in this position, making it a 3-box-3. or that could be in a sort of more typical right back position, allowing Aït-Nouri to push on with Nico as the sole pivot. Again, trying to sort of outmaneuver and outnumber that Wolves three. Because if one of those jumped onto the centre backs, and that would create an easy passing lane, it would maybe force Gomez or force Andre to come up and leave one of the attacking midfielders free. Or it could even be with a three diamond three, and that would be with Nico in the base or Rico Lewis moving into the right attacking midfield position with Reinders and Silva taking up the other positions. Doesn't have to be on the right hand side, it can be in the centre, depending on what the state of play was at that time. And this leaves Gomez and Andre a little bit outnumbered. They're at 2-on-3 in this position. So Stones could move forward here. He can move forward with the ball. He's got a little bit more space to pull past and outside of Bellegarde and can then find a ball to Reinders, Silva, or Lewis, depending on who the free man is. So again, always moving, always finding ways that they could exploit that wall shape depending on the situation. Also, their positional play, their fluidity, their rotations and positions was as excellent as anything. So Strand Larsen, as I mentioned, would typically pay closer attention to Nico. Maybe Nico moves back into this area, dragging Strand Larsen. Well, then this creates an opportunity for Silva to drop in and receive the ball without any real pressure if Strand Larsen's dropped in far too deep. Bellegarde and Manetzi can't maybe come across, so Silva's got time to turn, look forward. Strand Larsen maybe then has to react. He can slip that ball through to Nico Gonzalez, or he can play the ball to Doku or Bob, or just advance it in any way he likes. And as mentioned with Stones, City have a great level of ball carriers, which I don't think they've ever really had in this team from a midfield perspective before. And that was where Tiani Reinders came into his own. Now, he received the ball deep. He just happened to be the deeper player at that point. Nico moving a little bit higher, Lewis in the right attacking midfield position, and he was able to ride the challenges with that two players. And what that then gives you, if you can do that, if you can take some of these players out the game, I can't remember who it was exactly, but let's just say if it was Gomez and Andre, and he gets free of them, well, then that leaves attacking midfielders free to receive the passes. And him getting free then meant that Rico Lewis had a lot more freedom to make a movement in behind the defensive line. Reinders slipping the pass through, and then City get their goal. And I just thought Reinders being that player that could drive with the ball, going from defensive positions to attacking positions quickly to create better opportunities, I thought was key. And just being able to operate in those higher zones and in those deeper zones was massive. And it wouldn't just be him. Bernardo Silva could potentially do it. Rico Lewis, even Nico could travel with the ball from these areas. Aït-Nouri is a capable ball carrier as well. And so they really have mastered that. You can't just always pass teams to death. You've got to be able to show a little bit of quality. And when a player does what Reinders does, it gives Silva the opportunity to attack the half space. Rico Lewis has shown for the goal. And even in situations where Wolves wide centre backs can jump, which being in this Totti isn't at the number four, which being in a back five helps you do. So let's just say if Gomez decides to go and press Nico in this position here, well, then this gives more invitation for Totti to get closer to Rico Lewis and close him down. But if Reinders then makes his way past the Wolves midfield, Totti can't stick to Rico Lewis because A, that gives space for Reinders to drive through, and it also gives space for maybe Bob to make a movement from out to in, or Haaland to peel off into this space here. As much as in this position when it's in the 3-box-4, and Totti and Doherty go to press their attacking midfielders, it looks like Wolves have got City sort of where they want them. They've got them penned in. That's where just that extra level of quality can help you break down an opposition. And City have it in this player. He's going to be so crucial to their success this season. And also, then building up on the right hand side was key too. So you get Stones maybe coming forward or Rico Lewis in this position here. I always felt like Bernardo Silva did a really good job of sort of staying in a position in between Doherty or Hoover, just to almost bring them in narrow so that if City could get a free man with a bit of time and space to play the ball, they could fire it off to the opposite side to Doku, to Oscar Bob, where they could receive the ball in the wide areas and a little bit of space to either get a crossing opportunity themselves or have the invitation of an overlapping or underlapping player that gives them the opportunity of say Hoover tracks that, Doherty drops in a little bit when then Doku can move inside into these central areas to attack and get a shot away or slide a through ball in, or maybe play it to Bernardo Silva, who can have a good pop at a sort of half space open play cross to the far post, to the likes of Haaland coming in, to the likes of Lewis coming in, and create chances that way. So they did a fantastic job, City, of outnumbering that initial Wolves, for lack of a better term, press. It wasn't much for press, they were trying to contain. Got the numerical advantage, got the quality advantage, and then found ways to exploit that back five and did an excellent job of it. As I say, at their best, the quality of football, the one-touch play, the movement was all top level. It just typifies what a Pep Guardiola side can be. Haaland being a guy in the box to finish off the chances as well. He's inevitable. We all know he is. But how did City press the game? Defensively, they were an issue last season. What were they like this season? We'll go over it now. Wolves would build up with a back four, with Hoover pushed up into sort of a right wing position alongside the front three. Doherty would move into a right back position, sort of, as I say, making that look a bit more ordinary, but a bit one-sided in the attacking sense for Wolves. City would go near enough man-to-man. They would go with Haaland on one of the two centre-backs, with Bob and Doku on the full-backs, but depending on where that pass would go from Sarr, let's say if it goes to Agbadou, Haaland closes into Agbadou, Doku stays on Doherty, and Bob then moves up to Totti and pens Agbadou in, cuts off any easy pass to the point where he has to go back to the goalkeeper, of which someone will then shadow their marker to press the goalkeeper, forcing Sarr long into an aimless pass. This maybe does leave the left back free if he can find that ball in. But one thing I think City did excellently was their use of Nico Gonzalez in this game. Now, Nico Gonzalez in the pressing stage was a spare man. He was sort of the conductor, I guess. Reinders and Silva would push on to Andre and Gomez. That's what, two players in one now, or one player in two, either way. So that was pretty simple. Lewis and Aït-Nouri would cover Hoover and Bellegarde, with Diaz marking Minetti and Stones on Strand Larsen. Diaz and Stones could swap about. And what this then meant was that Nico could cover wherever the free man was created from. So let's just say if the ball goes to Wolf or to Doherty at fullback, depending on who's free, well, then the fullback closest can mark. So let's just say if it's Lewis coming across from Bellegarde to Wolf, or on this side it's Aït-Nouri moving up to Doherty from Hoover. Well, Diaz can come across and cover Aït-Nouri, or if Rico Lewis makes this movement out here to Wolf, John Stones can come across and cover. Maybe Diaz can cover here, leaving Minetti as the deeper man free where Nico Gonzalez can go to him, or depending on who's closest, it's generally all about proximity. Nico Gonzalez can come across and mark Bellegarde to then take care of the man that Rico Lewis leaves behind, as I see you then go full man-to-man to make sure everyone's protected. And City still have defensive cover of four in the line while keeping a solid press. And he did that fantastically. He was aware whenever a player would go to press. That's clearly down to good coaching, great communication to enable that. He covered it excellently. Also, I felt like got into a really good physical battle with Strand Larsen, who would look for the more direct pass from the back, from Sarr, from whoever, if City's press was enacted well. And Nico challenged him excellently. He gave him a real good physical battle. Strand Larsen found it very hard to contend with him. And it allowed Stones and Diaz to operate as the two centre backs back. It just offered them a lot more protection against Minetti and against Bellegarde, to allow Nico to just go and shield, press, and recycle the play for Manchester City if he went and won the ball, which he did more often than not. When they did hold on to the ball the odd time, however, Wolves did try and play through and get some good passing movements going. And for the most part, was near enough successful, if not for one man. I don't think Minetti knows what the offside rule is, because he was behind the defensive line more often than not. Now, City pulled off a really good offside trap. I felt like it's easier though when players are making as silly runs as Minetti is. And so the odd time that Strand Larsen could win his header, look for Bellegarde, look for a player showing for the second ball, Minetti was already sort of halfway to Tokyo in behind that defensive line. And it was a little bit frustrating to watch. There was a span of about 10 minutes where he must have got called offside about 5 times, got a goal disallowed. And as well, there were even points when Nico was marking Minetti and he just let his run go, which is a risk and something I'm not always a fan of. But the runs were so silly, it gave him that comfort blanket to just think, all right, run offside. I'm not bothered about what you're doing here. So it looked a lot better from City defensively. There wasn't the carved open midfield the way it was. Nico Gonzalez playing that shielding role that could adapt and read situations and provide cover for players to go and engage was key. Fantastically implemented. Really well done by City and Pep Guardiola. Spurs is a different test, though, and we've still got a lot to learn about this City side. And maybe that Spurs game is where we learn more. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Cheers for watching, lads. In a bit.